So I've been saying a lot that if we can have a deliberative conversation, if we can actually thoughtfully engage with diverse perspectives, we can actually come up with solutions and understanding that can create mutually agreeable outcomes. And I know that might sound like pie in the sky, unicorn rainbow stuff, but actually it's real. And we know that because people have been doing the research. So I'm going to give a shout out to James Fishkin and Larry Diamond and the folks at the Stanford Center for Deliberative Democracy. They have a process that they call deliberative polling. And this is mainly just a research tool, but what they have done is they have a project they call America in One Room. And they've done a couple iterations now where they get a representative sample of the population, a random selection of Americans from across the country with diversity of all the different demographics. Then they take them through a process and find out if they can get people to shift their opinions, to come to mutual understanding. And guess what? They can. The main research shows that people can move towards consensus or towards a majoritarian consensus, at least, if they have the right information and they're able to discuss about the issues. So if they can have accurate information and engage with people with different perspectives and have a thoughtful conversation, people can arrive at a consensus and people will shift their opinions. And all kinds of people will shift their opinions. It doesn't matter what state they're in, whether they're rural or urban or left or right or black or white or any race or gender or age. All people make shifts if they're able to get accurate information and engage in a thoughtful conversation. And so I'll just quickly tell you how they did this. The most recent one they did was about climate change and energy. They did two processes, one based in um, California, one based in Texas. They had folks from all across the United States, 962 of them. And one group had a discussion that went on for an entire weekend, and another group did it over 4 weeknights, over 4 weeks. And so, how do they do this? Well, they start with a poll and ask them 72 questions about the issue that they're going to be discussing. And they log all that information. And then they give them the information packet. This information packet has all the different perspectives and information about the issues. And then they break them up into small groups, which is something that I recommended in the last video. In this case, they broke into 104 groups. So that's about 9-10 people a group. And then they have a conversation. They deliberate, they talk about the information in the packet, and they come up with some questions. And then they all get together in a plenary session and they ask the questions of a panel of experts that go across the political spectrum as well. Then, after that process, they get polled again in the same 72 questions. And even while they're doing this, there's a control group that over the same period of time, 600 folks that didn't get the packet, didn't have the conversations, didn't get to ask the questions, and then they compare them. And it turns out that people moved towards consensus. All they needed was accurate information and an opportunity to discuss the issue with people that knew what they were talking about and people who didn't know what they were talking about but just had different opinions. So there are various other processes like this that can actually move towards making decisions and such. But even in this just one simple process over a weekend or 4 weeknights, we're able to show that if people have the right information, they can actually come to learn how to agree with each other. So this illusion of the division is, it's maybe not an illusion, it's real, but it's mainly because we just aren't using the right process, we don't have the right relationships, and we don't have the right content. And that is what is undermining our decision making. So I talked also about the media. So the media is playing a huge part of this, and they're trying to get the attention of everyone, but also the media does a thing where they will look at an issue and then they're going to take this side and they're going to show the other side, and so they're playing into that binary dynamic. And so I really want to lift up the work of a journalist named Amanda Ripley. She has written this book called High Conflict. The subtitle here is Why We Get Trapped and How We Get Out. It's beautifully written. It tells the story of various folks in different kinds of experiences, and folks in Colombia, people who are living in the streets, people who are politicians, and various things. So it's a great narrative, but she really has had a revelation that, wait a minute, as a journalist, we are exacerbating this problem and we need to do better. And that the tools of conflict resolution and conflict transformation actually can be applied to the way that we do media. And so she has come up with a really amazing concept that she calls complicating the narrative. And it's a way of breaking people out of the this or that thinking. And one thing that I'll make sure to share here is the link for this, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. She's come up with 22 interview questions that can be used by journalists to complicate the narrative that they're trying to tell and to break out of binary thinking. So I'll just quickly go over a couple of them, but one of the ideas is to amplify the contradictions and widen the lens. And so these are kinds of questions that is helping people try to understand what is dividing us on this issue, and asking people to think about where they're not totally sure that they got the answer right. Where are you torn? What part of the other side's argument do you find compelling? So that's one layer. Another layer is to ask questions to get to people's motivations. These are some of those questions about underlying needs and interests that I spoke about in the last video. And basically, why is this important to you? How has this experience changed your life? How has this conflict affected you? What do you want to understand about the other side? What does the other side need to understand about you? Just like trying to get people to really think about why they care about something instead of just whatever the position that they're taking or the slogan or talking point that they're using. The next set of questions are really about effective listening, really like reflective listening. So it's like, tell me more. How do you feel telling me about this? Like, what are the questions that nobody's asking? And I love this one, just reflecting back. Oh, can I interrupt you? I just want to make sure I have everything right. And honestly, this is so powerful. Stating back to someone like what they have just said helps them feel understood. It kind of calms everything down. Like real magic can happen there. But then there's the ability to make sure that you're getting it right. And sometimes people will change their perspective when they actually hear their words reflected back to them. And then this last little group is a little spicier, but I find it to be really interesting. Asking people to think in the mind of the other side, to expose them to the other tribe, and to go against any confirmation bias. So, like, what do you think the other group thinks of you? What is it that you think the other group wants? And is there anything about how the media is portraying you or that feels inaccurate? These are all tools that can help us understand what is going on and just get ourselves out of the taking one side or the other as something very different. Of course, you don't have to be a journalist to use this, though I totally encourage all the journalists out there to go check this out and to use this list. And again, I'll include some resources so you can find this and some videos where this is explained. And again, I encourage you to check out High Conflict by Amanda Ripley. There's some other things that we can do actually as individuals. And some of this I want to lift up as coming from this book called The Way Out, How to Overcome Toxic Polarization by Peter Coleman. I'll share a link for this book, but I'll also share a link for an article about it if you just want the article version. It's by Ryan Nakata, who's going to be a guest on the Omni-Win Project podcast. He has a great distillation of this book, or one of the specific chapters. And the chapter is about what he calls contradictory complexity. And there's 6 elements that each of us as individuals can do in our lives to start undermining polarization. Unless you still want to keep doing polarization, you're welcome to. But for those of the rest of us that are wanting to find solutions more than fighting for one side or the other, here are some techniques that you can use. One of them is, you can do this quietly by yourself. You don't have to tell anyone about this. You can maybe journal about it and burn the paper or whatever, but acknowledge your own contradictions. Look into your heart and think about, what is the stuff that I don't really know? What are the questions that I'm asking? What are the things that don't really quite ring true for me? Or how might I be wrong? No one likes being wrong. And I'll talk about that a bit in the future. Like, how do we deal with the feeling of maybe being wrong? But that's the first one. Step 1, start thinking about your own contradictions. Again, you can do this on your own in secret if you want, but that's a really important first step. Next is what Peter Coleman calls think with the best of them. And that is, go and talk to people who think the other way and actually engage with them and have a conversation and ask them questions. Basically, go and engage with people who think differently than you, or who might have a different perspective. And, especially those who are, like actually willing to engage with you and have like maybe a thoughtful perspective on it. Another thing that you can do is complicate the problem. And now complicating the problem is basically start thinking about the problem not as just a binary digital choice, but actually as something that's complex and interrelated. All the issues, just like a hint here, all the important issues that we're trying to deal with in our world right now, guns, complexity, guns, climate, race, gender, police, criminal justice, whatever it is, these are all complex issues. There's a ton of moving parts, and they cannot be reduced to just this or that. So step 3, complicate the problem. And then the step 4 is complicate the conversations. When we go into a debate and we're trying to win or lose or defend our position, we'll we'll just exacerbate the situation that we're in. The depth of the issues that we're dealing with, argument is never going to work, actually. So you're not going to convince anyone of anything in a single conversation. It's never happened. And it's a bummer, because it seems like we should just be able to give people the right information and they would agree with us, but they don't. So complicating the conversation is actually about engaging in a dialogue and going into a conversation with the possibility that that person might have as much to offer as you do. There's, as Steve McIntosh says, that just think about the other person as like a good faith and good faith and sensibility, that this person probably for some good reason believes that what they do. Ask them, try to understand, use that reflective listening. Step 5 is complicate the narrative, and that's a little hat tip to Amanda Ripley. If you're not making the news as a journalist, pay attention to different news sources. So one thing Daniel Schmachtenberger recommends is, if you're on the left, go read Breitbart for a week or two, Fox News or something. And if you're on the right, go read Mother Jones or MSNBC. Expose yourself to that other perspective. I promise you, you'll be okay. You might grow a little bit, but it's not going to hurt you to actually expose yourself to the other perspective and try to figure out, why do they think the way they think? If that feels too hardcore for you, there's some really great resources for getting different sides of the media. One is called Flipside, flipside.io. Another one is called All Sides Media. And then again, the Consilience Project is doing some really great, deep, nonpartisan, high-level analysis of the news. It's just that that's a little slower the way they do it. So you're not going to get, yesterday's news in that feed. Fifth thing that you can do to start overcoming polarization, according to Peter Coleman, and that is complicate your community. This is kind of similar to just thinking with the best of them, go and talk to someone else. But what would it actually be like for you to go and make friends with them? What would it be like to go and join a group or a club? Go join a church or the gun club or the, progressive social change group or whatever that might be. A cooking group. Go find a place where you can actually, on your life, on your day to day, be engaging on a regular basis and creating friendships with people who have different political perspectives than you. And almost all places of diversity, humanizing another person and letting you be humanized in their eyes is exactly how we make change. And that's the kind of change that's going to help us overcome our polarization and help us start co-creating the future for all of us. So thanks for watching this. I will close with a couple words from Daniel Schmachtenberger from the Consilience Project. New institutions cannot arise out of a vacuum. They will have to emerge from a new cultural movement that values the health of our epistemic commons, high quality reasoning, and open dialogue in an open society with the end of creating a more perfect democratic union. Look, it can require like deep, far reaching cultural change and institutional change for us to start co-creating the future of a democracy, to create the Omni-Win future. And I don't know if we're going to succeed, but I'm willing to try because I know that it's up to us. We are in a democracy. We are the people. And that actually is one of my favorite lessons from the In This Together project, is that those politicians and businesses and media, they all are dependent on us. They're dependent on us for votes. They're dependent on us for money, and they're dependent on us for our attention. And so we get to choose where we put our attention. And that is democracy. That's how we're going to co-create the future of democracy. Now, this is some big stuff, and I'm going to go take it to a next level. So my next video is going to be talking about how do we go beyond polarization. And I'm going to introduce two concepts. One is called polarity thinking, or polarity management. And the other one is complex systems theory. And by using these tools, I think that we can take this digitalization, polarization, and we can unpack it into this beautiful analog, complex, nuanced world that we live in, which can allow us to make beautiful analog, complex, nuanced decisions. And that might actually be sustainable and address the issues that we're trying to face as a world, because we need to do it. So thank you for watching this video. My name is Duncan Autry, and this is part of the Omni-Win project. Coming this summer is going to be a new podcast. It's going to be called the Omni-Win Project Podcast, and it should be coming out on the 4th of July. If you want to stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, or if you want to get emails where I'm creating written and video content, you can do that at omniwin.substack.com. And that will give you a once or twice a week email with an essay that also has the videos in it as well. Thank you for your interest and passion and support in helping to co-create the future of democracy. Thank you.